Massive changes are coming to Star Wars movies, according to what Bob Iger, president of Disney, said yesterday. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're already kind of aware of this. We have to break it all down. This is the Nerdy News Rundown. Let's get you filled in. Extra strong coffee today because of, well, this freaking news. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, yesterday Bob Iger sat down with The Hollywood Reporter and talked about a bunch of things about Disney films. He touched on the Roseanne situation. He touched on the James Gunn situation. He talked about the streaming service, several other things. But what really made waves, what was by far the most picked up upon part of his statement in the interview, is what he had to say about Star Wars film. Let me read you what he said in the interview right now. So he said, I made the timing decision. And as I look back, I think the mistake that I made, pause, I take the blame, pause, was a little too much too fast. You can expect some slowdown, but that doesn't mean we're not going to make films. J.J. Abrams is busy making episode 9. We have creative entities, including Dave and Dan, he goes on to say their actual names, who are developing sagas of their own, which we haven't been specific about. And we are just at the point where we're going to start making decisions about what comes next after JJ's. But I think we're going to be a little bit more careful about volume and timing. And the buck stops here on that. I don't know if in the history of interviews and little quotes, if there has been a situation like this where so much has been taken from a single statement, but that's where we're at with this. It's no secret that the state of Star Wars is shaky right now. Star Wars as a property has seen better days, mostly those days surrounding the Force Awakens release in 2015. Since that project, and this includes Rogue One, which of course had its own controversies attached to it, Lucasfilm and Disney have made some mistakes. And what's interesting about this statement by Bob Iger is it's being held up by some people as the first time ever that Disney is taking some blame. They're taking some credit for what is happening with Star Wars. Now, it's also no secret that the state of the Star Wars fandom right now is pretty triggery. There's a lot of people upset with what happened with The Last Jedi. Solo: A Star Wars Story was the lowest earning Star Wars film of all time, and things are just in a shaky state right now. And I don't have to really say that to many of you. Many of you already know this. We live in this fandom. We understand it completely. So now I want to break down some of the things that he said in this statement and talk about what I believe they mean. Now, a lot of this is going to be my interpretation of this, but I'd like to think of myself as a pretty logical guy. I'm pretty much in the middle of the fan divide. I love The Last Jedi. Thought there was a bunch of mistakes made in that movie. I like Disney Star Wars. I think they can massively improve on the products that they put out. And so let's start with the end of his statement, where he says the buck stops here on that. Now, this is something that's very interesting to me. I'm very glad he made this statement. He's essentially taking some of the heat off of Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy. Now, if you haven't been following this whole Kathleen Kennedy situation, there's a lot of people calling for her to be fired because she is the president of Lucasfilm and people are unsatisfied with the products that Lucasfilm is putting out. It's sort of like a through line like that. Now, what's interesting about this statement is this echoes something that we had heard make noise a couple of months ago, where Kathy Kennedy's husband was apparently talking with executives at Disney, including Bob Iger, talking about how he was allowing Kathy to take all these shots from the fandom when he knows damn well that some of these decisions were actually Bob's, not Kathy's. And it would appear in this statement, especially when you talk about the timing of Solo, that was a decision made by Bob Iger. Now, we have actually heard rumors that there's a lot of oversight by Iger when it comes to Star Wars, and that a lot of it has made things very difficult for Kathy Kennedy and other people at Lucasfilm. And we don't know if that's true or not, but it kind of makes logical sense that not all of the blame should be put on Kathy Kennedy. And I personally always thought that there were decisions being made by Iger or other people, perhaps even Alan Horn, that were interfering and causing friction within Star Wars. And so I'm glad he made that statement. I think it makes sense considering some of the things that we have heard from behind the scenes. Now let's talk about the slowdown here. Now, I've heard so many different people talk about this and try to interpret it in different ways, and it kind of boggles my mind. It feels like some people are going out of their way to take that statement and try to make it say that they're not going to stop the frequency of Star Wars movies, when I think that is precisely what he is talking about. When you're talking about volume, when you're talking about timing, I think you're literally talking about the frequency by which you make these movies and release them. So I think he's completely talking about that. You know what I mean? Like, this is an idea where they might not even do a single movie a year. I don't even think there'll be a Star Wars film in 2020 after Episode 9. I think a lot of decisions are going to be made. I think they're going to focus on the Dan and Dave stuff. The next saga will be that, I believe. And I think they will sort of take their time, put a year, maybe even 2 years between those saga films and really space things out. And so I just find it odd, like, logically speaking, when you look at the problems that he's talking about and the statement that he makes about the slowdown, and he even says we're still making films. Guys, it just logically makes sense. We're getting a Star Wars slowdown. Now, this echoes other reports about them stopping the spin-off movies, the Obi-Wan film going away, probably no Boba Fett movie, which of course had James Mangold's name attached to it. I was pretty excited about that, but it looks like those films will probably not exist under this Disney slowdown. All right, now let's get into the Rian Johnson of it all. The main point of controversy within the Star Wars fandom right now, and that's just reality. That's just the state that we're in. Now, Bob Iger does explain that they're still going to be making films, and within that quote, he says, we have entities involved with their own sagas. Let me pull that quote up again. And so he says, we have creative entities, including Dan and Dave, who are developing sagas of their own, which we haven't been specific about. So here's the thing. A lot of people are saying, well, he didn't mention Rian Johnson's name, and that automatically means the Rian Johnson trilogy is done. Now, to me, I just think that's a leap in logic, okay? There's nothing definitive in this statement that's suggesting that the Rian Johnson trilogy is axed, but I do think it is telling that he does not come out and mention Rian Johnson. First of all, this is an interview that they planned, okay? This isn't like some statement that was taken during a conference or something like that. This was planned by Disney. This is a PR move. If you don't think they were incredibly specific about the questions and the answers, meaning they got the questions from THR, they okayed them, and came up with very political answers to them, you're crazy. That's how this shit works. And so it was definitely a move by Bob Iger to not say Rian Johnson's name. That does not mean that the trilogy is dead. It does mean, however, that they are at least aware that putting out Rian's name, attaching to something that's supposed to talk about the future of Star Wars, is not a good PR move. Now, that is the long and short of it. And I believe it's also a move where they bring up Dan and Dave, or Bob brings up Dan and Dave specifically, because I think behind closed doors, they would probably be leaning towards that saga taking place first rather than the Rian Johnson trilogy. You know, it just makes sense. I mean, I think first of all, people are more excited about Dan and Dave's trilogy in general. If you look at the fandom, it's kind of across the board. People are excited. A lot of people believe that it's going to be Old Republic, kind of a new era to explore on the silver screen when it comes to Star Wars. It just kind of makes sense that that would be the way they go. And I think the Rian Johnson trilogy will get a long, long hiatus, and it will not even be called the Rian Johnson trilogy once it comes to fruition. I don't think Rian's name will be front and center when promoting that trilogy. Who knows? Maybe we'll give it some time. The fandom will sort of come around. Things will quiet down. There'll be less hatred and vitriol out there. And then, yeah, they'll put Rian's name on it. But I think, as I have said many times in videos, it just does not make sense from a business perspective to have the man that did the most controversial Star Wars film of all time, that in some ways catalyzed us into this area of fandom that we're at right now. It does not make sense to make that your next flagship set of films. It just doesn't make sense from a business perspective. So that's where I stand on it. It doesn't mean it's over. It definitely means they're aware that Rian is, at least triggery for people, and they're not going to put it front and center. And my honest opinion of this is that we will not get the Rian Johnson trilogy, or at least we will not get it in the way we may have had The Last Jedi been more well received. And I think just look at that statement I just made. Kind of just makes logical sense, right? Try to take the emotion out of it and just think about it logically. I don't think it's going to happen. And so that is the news out there, guys. A Star Wars slowdown is on the way. maybe we're not getting the Rian Johnson trilogy, although I don't think there's anything definitive there. And Bob Iger takes a little bit of heat off of Kathy Kennedy and admits that he had made mistakes, which resulted in at least part of the Solo box office failure. I know this is a touchy subject for Star Wars fans, as everything is these days, but I definitely want to know your opinion. All opinions are welcome here at the Den of Nerds, so let us know what you're thinking in those comments down below. That is going to do it for the Friday show. You made it through another work week. Congratulations. Hope you found some comfort here in these nerdy videos. As I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.